Welcome to Daily Armor. Today we're going to be in Acts chapter 10. We'll be looking at really the whole chapter, but for the sake of time, I just want to read verse number 28 before we get started. Verse number 28 says, "And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation, but God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean." Now, let's understand what's going on here. This is Peter, and we're meeting Cornelius at the beginning of this chapter, and there's a lot of things that are going on at the same time. There's Peter's in a certain location. He's praying. He's waiting, for lunch. He goes into a trance. There's a lot of things going on at the house of Cornelius. He is praying. The Lord is speaking to him and saying, I've heard your prayer. And he sends him on this journey, and he sends his people out on a journey. And so we're going to see how Peter and Cornelius are going to connect where normally they would not be a connection there. So let's go back at the beginning of chapter number 10. It says, "There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian Band." So he is a Roman centurion, and he's in Caesarea. This is a Roman, and then we're going to be talking about Peter, who's a Jew, and Peter, who's a Jew, and he is a devout Jew. He's trying to cross all the T's, dot all the I's. He's not going to be found socializing with a bunch of Romans. He's not going to be found eating, partaking of anything, that's not lawful for him to partake of. He is really going to have to get over some himself. He's going to have to get over some traditions. He's going to have to get over what somebody else might think about it. He's going to have to push a lot of these things aside to simply do what God asked. If I was to give this little devotion a title, the title would be Trust and Obey. So many times I have to get myself out of the way. That the way that I think, like the Lord constantly is telling me to do things that I'm like, but Lord, I'm not able to do that. And he's like, yeah, you are. Because I'm telling you to do it. Because I'm the one who's given the word. Because it's all because of him. I'm constantly thinking, about, the disadvantages that, that there is by having me do something, or that I'm slow at learning something. I have to work and work and work. It takes me a long time, to grasp something, or that's not the way I thought things were going to go, or that's not how I thought that things were going to play out, or that's not as black and white as it's black or white, one or the other. And so the Lord has really had me to go against myself. And I think probably if you're like me, you are probably your worst, problem. Because you have all this stuff that goes through your mind. Now we also have to push aside what everybody else thinks about it. As I am waiting on the Lord to give me some answers about some scenarios, there's 2 or 3 things in my life that I'm needing some answers for. Of course, apparently I don't need them right this second, but I am asking for him to, let me know. Why? Because myself is getting in the way. Because I can't seem to discern, because there's pros here, there's cons here, there's, all the traditional things that when we make a decision, are trying to think about, but ultimately we don't know. We're just taking our best guess, and me taking my best guess, and then there's that component of what I want, of what the flesh is desiring and what I would like. I would like to, maybe mix some things up around here. I'm trying to find, what's going to work for me. And I have to push all that, aside, because it's not about what works for me. And I have so seen this with the Lord, even when, doing something when I have had to trust and obey and simply do it without thought of myself, letting myself get in the way, just push, like when you don't feel good and you want to stay home and you get up anyway. Do it because the Lord wants you to do it. Do it because you love the Lord. It's not about what I want. It's not about what the flesh is telling me to do. It's not about, what my mindset is. It's not, I'm like, I can't do that. There's a lot of that stuff that goes on in our minds that'll try to mess us up, try to trip us up. But when we simply walk by faith and not by sight and move forward, no matter what I think about it, no matter what I want, and there's definitely been some things over the last 23 years that I have not wanted to do, that I did not get why the Lord would choose me for this. I didn't understand why this was a good idea. I myself was getting in the way. But I'm like, at some point, you're going to come to that resolve. You're either going to rebel and refuse. And I've seen a lot of people do that. And a lot of people even, saying, I just wouldn't. I'm like, okay, well, if it's the Lord telling you that, are you saying you just wouldn't, no matter if the Lord himself is telling you that? I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Maybe I have hesitated and maybe I've questioned, but ultimately, my goal is to simply do what he wants me to do and not what I want, not what others, and a lot of times, a lot of others are they're seeing some kind of danger. But when it's coming from the Lord, and that's what I'm speaking, I'm not talking about trusting myself. I'm not talking about trusting others. I'm not talking about trusting in tradition. Well, this is the way I've always done it. Well, this is the way I've always been. Well, this is the way I've always felt about this. That's not what we're talking about. Peter is going through all of this right now. We're seeing here in Acts chapter 10, he is experiencing every bit of this. And this is going against everything that he has been taught, everything that he already had in his brain, everything that all the conclusions that he's already made about why this is crazy, this won't work, this doesn't make any sense. But yet he had to come to that point where he simply stopped and didn't let his brain get in the way, and he just simply walked by faith and had to go forward. So here we're speaking about, we learn a few things about Cornelius in verses 1 through 8. I'm not going to read everything for the sake of time. You go back and read this whole chapter. It's really good, and read it very slowly, and there's like lots of little keywords that if you don't, if you're not careful, you'll go too fast and you'll miss them. I've tried to circle a few things that stood out to me for today. But here we're talking about Cornelius. So God's going to put Cornelius and Peter together. This is God's plan. This is not Cornelius' idea. He didn't know anything, about Peter. And this is definitely not Peter's idea, because Peter is like, I don't associate with the Romans. I don't associate. I'm not going to waste my time. This is, Peter had already had all this stuff going on in his head. And God's going to put these two together for the furtherance of the kingdom, for the furtherance of the gospel. That's what this is truly, truly about. This is making a huge leap into the gospel, reaching out, not just to the Jews, which the Lord said to the Jews first, and then to the Gentiles. See, Peter, he forgets about that part sometimes, he didn't, he hears the Jews first, but he's, not him, Lord, it's not his responsibility to go out to the Gentiles. It's not, he can't associate with the Gentiles, because that's very un-Jewish like of him to do that. So here we've got stuff going on at the same time, because I've noticed a word while keep popping up in the scriptures. And while one thing's going on over here, then another thing, then the Lord's letting us have a little glimpse of what's going on over there, that we would have no idea. And so we have to remind ourselves that while you're going through some things and what's happening in your life, God's got some things going on over here, and he's going to connect the dots. He's going to put it together. And it may go against yourself, so don't let yourself get in the way. Push aside your questions. We're going to take in a bunch of comments. We're going to take in a bunch of, other people's opinions or ideas, whether we were asking for it or not. And yet we simply have to we even have to push aside traditions, the way we've normally done something, the way we've normally lived our life, the way we've normally, everything. I mean, I can tell you from finances to eating, to thinking, to where I lived, to what I do, to, I mean, I don't think there's not one part of my life that God hasn't touched and gave me instructions that goes against traditions and myself and what everybody else wants me to do. But yet he tells me, just trust. You know, that's why one of the main verses that I held to was Proverbs 3:5-7. It was just simply trusting in the Lord, leaning not unto my own understanding. It push aside all that. Peter had to push aside all that to do what God wanted him to do. And then Peter's mind was blown, and we'll see that here at the end of, toward the end of chapter 10. So we're meeting Cornelius. He is trying to do the right things. He's trying his best to get to God. We know that the very best that we can do, we cannot get to God, but he has to come to us, and that's exactly what he's doing here in the life of Cornelius. He has come to Cornelius. He is telling him that he wants him to do something. Let's get into the scriptures and let's just dive right in. It says, verse 3. Let's go on down to verse number 3. And this is Cornelius. He saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. And now send men to Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He said, I want you to go ask for somebody. Now, Cornelius doesn't have any idea if who this person is, if this person will come. This is a word he's getting from, the messenger of the Lord. The Lord himself is saying, I have words for you, I have instructions for you, and I just want you to go forward. He lodges in one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside, and he shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. He's like, I'm going to give you some instructions. I'm only going to give you some of them. This is where I want you to go. This is who I want you to ask for. Not telling him much after that. Sometimes the Lord was going to only give us parts of the plan. He's like, this is what I want you to do. This is, what I want you to expect. And then when you get there, then we'll talk about what happens next. So Cornelius, of course, is responding immediately, and he calls, it says, verse number 7, and when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. So he's got his people. He calls them in to immediately do this. And when he told them everything that he was told to do or to send them to do, he sent them to Joppa. Now, on the morrow, verse number 9, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. So this is where I want you to notice. While they're on their way, Peter went up to the housetop to pray. So this stuff is happening at the same time. God's doing something, in the life of Cornelius, and Cornelius has sent out his he sent out his servants, and they're going to, ask for Peter, told him, where to go, who to ask for. And now Peter, doesn't know anything about what's fixing to take place. But God's showing us that 2 things are going on at the same time, and it's part of his plan. Verse number 10, and he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready. So while they were getting the food ready, Peter's up there on the rooftop. It says, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. And he saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the 4 corners and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill, and eat. Now he's seeing all these things. He's got a vision of all these things. He's hungry. He's wanting to eat, but he's seeing all these things that is as if he's supposed to eat them, that are available, but it's things that are unclean, that have been declared unclean, that as a Jew, he's not supposed to eat of these things. And yet he's here, and notice how this is red letter. Rise, Peter, kill and eat. I'm just thinking, this is red letter. This is Jesus speaking. Now, Jesus has already ascended to the Father. He is not here physically speaking this, but he's here physically speaking this. And I'm thinking, Peter, he knows the shepherd. He knows the voice. Because look how he responds. But Peter said, not so, Lord. He's just responding to the voice of Jesus because he knows the voice of Jesus. He is familiar with the shepherd's voice. And he responds, oh, not so, Lord. For I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Well, I want you to notice that phrase, I have never. I have never done a lot of things. I have never even thought about doing a whole lot of things. It's not a part of my customs, my traditions. It's not part of my thinking. It's not part of my palate. It's not part of my processes. Think about this. I have not, let me find it again. I have never. We have to be careful when we're thinking about what we've never done, because the Lord himself may want us to do that exact thing that we've never done. Lord, I've never done that. I don't know how to do that. That feels wrong. But Jesus is the one speaking here. And if Jesus tells Peter to do something, it's not wrong. It goes against himself. It goes against what others are going to think. And it goes against traditions that he's been taught. And preconceived notions in his brain, that the way his brain operates and the way he thinks. But it doesn't mean that it's wrong, because it's coming from the Lord himself. And that's the kind of word from the Lord I'm wanting. I'm wanting a word from the Lord where, Lord, I cannot even argue myself out of it. I cannot even give you any kind of rebuttal whatsoever. I'm not going to be worried about what other comments are going to be. I'm not going to consider their comments. I mean, I know they'll have, that they'll be well-intentions, and I'm not going to be rude about it. But when it boils down to, I'm not going to listen to it either, because I'm not going to listen to myself. I'm not going to listen to others, and I'm not going to, but this is the way I've always, the way I've always been, or the way I'm wired. I'm not going to listen to any of that stuff, but I simply want a word from the Lord where I know that I'm just going to have to walk out by faith, not by sight. I'm just simply going to have to trust and obey, and then learn some things along the way, and know that he's training me and growing me, and going to be showing me some things along the way. So here the voice speaks up again in verse number 15. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. He's like, well, if I'm telling you to do it, don't worry about traditionally what you've done in the past. What God has said, what God has cleansed, what God is doing. We see that so many times. You'll see that if you're reading it, the chapter before in the book of Acts, chapter number 9. That's where Saul is converted, and then Ananias has to go to where he is. And he's like, but Lord, I've heard about this man, and this is, he's questioning, he's got some anxiety that's welled up, but yet he goes and he does what the Lord asked him to do. And that's what we're finding here in Acts chapter 10 is it's not making any sense. Peter's going against himself to do this. He's going against his traditions to do this. He's going against maybe even comments from others to do this. But he's simply going to end up obeying the Lord. And he's going to see some amazing things. It says this was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. So this was, over and over. Now while Peter doubted in himself. I want you to notice this while. So while he's still doubting in himself, what has the Lord just told me? How am I supposed to process this? What has just happened? He is trying to make sense. He's trying to think, well, what do I do now? What does this mean? Now while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate. The men are right outside. Peter's thinking about this, and he's like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information. While outside, Cornelius's servants and soldier are right outside, are at the gate, and they are asking. They're doing exactly what they were told to do: go to Simon's house, and ask for ask for one called Peter, and called in verse number 18, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. He's like, is Peter here? Now, look again, verse number 19, while Peter thought on the vision. So Peter's, he's doubting within himself what's taking place. He's thinking about the vision. While all this is going on, the Spirit said unto him, behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise, therefore, and get thee down and go with them. And go with them, doubting nothing. Why did he tell him don't doubt nothing? Why did he tell him that? Because he knows he's doubting himself. He knows that this is going to seem strange. This is going to be uncomfortable. There's a soldier and two Roman servants, and he's taking him to a Roman city, to a Roman's house, a centurion. I mean, this is not going to make any sense whatsoever. And the message for Peter is, arise, go, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Verse 21, then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius and said, behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore ye are come? He's like, he still doesn't know what's going on. He still doesn't know why he's been requested. And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of a good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from God by a holy angel to send for thee into his house, and to hear words of thee. So now he's finding out that he's going to go to Cornelius's house, and he's going to speak to them. He's going to preach to them. He's going to share with them the gospel is what he's going to do. And that's why up here in verse number 20, it says, doubting nothing. Arise, go, doubting nothing. Just do it. I like that song, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Simply trust and obey means get yourself out of the way, get others out of the way, get the traditions out of the way, and just simply go. Just simply do what God says. It doesn't make any sense. It is scary. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to do things. But when God is giving us instruction, He will give us the pieces when it's time to give us the pieces. And we just simply have to trust and obey. And here we go. And he goes with them. Then called he them in and lodged them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. So they leave the next day and they go. And I want you to notice that, Cornelius is excited. He bows down and to worship him. And Peter's like, oh no, stand up. Verse number 26, stand up. I myself also am a man. He's like, oh no, please, that, don't do anything like that. I'm only here because the Lord has sent me. I'm just a regular guy. Peter's like, I am so confused. I don't know what in the world. But verse 27 says, and as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together. So in the meantime, Cornelius has called everybody. And he's saying, the Lord has sent, told me to ask for Peter. He's going to come. He rounded up everybody that he could get to come. And he said unto them, verse 28, and he said unto them, this is Peter speaking, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come in unto one of another nation. He's saying, this is not normal. This is not what traditionally I'm supposed to be doing. This is not even in myself, something I thought that I would be doing. He's saying, but. So I want you to notice that word, but. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. He's like, I'm here because God is changing my mind. He is changing, He's doing some things. And I'm simply walking by faith and not by sight. I have come because the Lord said go. I have doubts, but the Lord says don't doubt nothing. Just go and do what I want you to do. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying. As soon as I was sent for, I asked therefore for what intent ye have sent for me. He's saying, I've responded, and I'm, what do you want me here for? And you want me to speak to you. Now I want us to go all the way down to verse number 34. Verse number 34 is where Peter begins preaching the gospel. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, "Of a truth, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him." He is saying, the Lord has just blown my mind. And this message, this gospel message, is not just for the Jews, but it is for the Gentiles. And he went as every nation. This wasn't just for the Jews and the Romans. Peter's mind has been blown. And now he's thinking way outside his small little, his traditional little mindset. And he is going global right here. His mind has been blown. The word which God sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ. He is Lord of all. And Peter is getting it, and he is putting it into practice. And he goes on to preach. And we see here that if you go down to verse number 44, that while he was still preaching, so much is going on while he's preaching. Verse number 44, while Peter yet spake these words, the Holy Ghost fell on all them which heard the word. Heard the word. What word? God's word. The gospel message. The message of the Lord. The message that Jesus Christ had for Peter to share. The message from Jesus Christ that we're to share with others. That word that we need from him. And the word that Peter got was go, arise and go. And, and just follow and keep going and don't think about it too much. Don't let yourself get in the way, but simply go. And so we see that the Holy Ghost fell on them which heard the word. People are getting saved. And this is just astonishing. And as you finish out the chapter with verse number 48, and he commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord, then prayed they him to tarry certain days. He has made all these new friends, all these new companions, all this, fellow believers in Jesus Christ, connecting that gap from the Jew to the Gentile. And God has used Peter of all people, Peter who would have never saw himself doing any such thing, and they're coming together, and Peter's understanding now this is global. His mind has been blown. This is more about, the gospel going everywhere, and Peter sees that now, and it's simply because he got a word from the Lord, and he got away from himself. He got away from, he had to push aside his questions. He had to push aside his doubts, his fears. He had to push aside others' comments. He had to, you can't consider all that. And he had to push aside traditions and the way he normally would do things. And simply trust and obey. Simply trust and obey. For there's no other way. There's no other way for us to be happy, us to be content, us to be in the will of God, but to simply trust and obey. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.